Today, I met a new face of my husband, which scared me. We've been married for 3 years and together for 6 years. He's a person who is very, very peaceful. I even asked myself if he had never had a fight in his life, but every time I asked him about that, he only told me that he didn't want to talk about it. I believed he was a pacifist. He always preferred to get away before beginning a fight or even a discussion, but that changed today. We were on a bus, returning from work. He gets out of work early every Friday, so he went to meet me, and we returned home together. The thing is that it was a man on the bus that was making his TikToks. He was there slapping, softly, persons randomly in the bus and recording their reactions. My husband was one of his victims. He turned around and looked at the boy and asked for an apology. He said sorry, and it was all. Now, that kid, I'm referring to him as a kid since he looked younger, maybe someone near the beginning of his 20s, and we went out of the bus at the same bus stop, and that was when everything went to hell. The kid, before leaving the bus, slapped my husband again and ran. Now, my husband is someone thin, but he always does exercise at home, so he ran after him and got him pretty fast. That was the first time I was my husband punching someone. He took the kid from behind and punched his back, then made him look at my husband. He began to punch him in the face, once, twice, 3 times, when I saw my husband's fist was bleeding. Still, he didn't stop. He then took the kid and stomped his head against the sidewalk. That was when I interviewed him. I tried to separate them, but my husband didn't stop. He kept punching him and saying, "I told you to apologize, now I want you to beg for forgiveness." While he was still punching him when I stopped him, the kid was crying. His face was an absolute mess. His nose and lips were bleeding. His eyes were swollen. We were lucky that we live in a place where at night there is almost no one in the street so late at night, so I took my husband and told him we should escape and take a taxi since we had to take another bus. Something we did. Once in the taxi, I wanted to talk to him about that, but he only told me, that's the only language that savage people understand. I asked him to stop. An adult should know how to follow orders. Now, I don't know how to feel, I've never known that part of him. I know it is essential for men to defend themselves, but what he did was something beyond that. He wanted that kid to beg for his forgiveness. That made me feel a little scared. I know he never wanted to talk about the fights he had during school, something that is very normal for men to talk about. I suppose now I know why. He told me that he just was out of patience, and I believe him, and I love him. But remembering the crying and scared face of that kid still makes me think. That kid, yes, was legally an adult, but still a young man. They do stupid things. That's what young people are for. What if we have a son and he beats him up like that because he's an adult that can't follow orders? I may be overthinking this. I should feel glad that my husband can defend himself. Also, I see him differently, more intimidating, but in a good way. I also can't explain that. Update: a lot has happened this week. My husband and I spoke last Saturday night about what happened. I asked him if we could talk, and he told me it was okay. Surprisingly, he answered all my questions and did not limit himself or try to divert the topic like before. He wanted to talk about this, too. I asked him many things I read in the comments and several that came to me by private message. But in summary, he told me that he did not suffer from bullying at school until his last year of high school when his father transferred him to a public school for men only. That the first month he spent there, he did suffer bullying for being the new one until he confronted his dad about his decision. That's when he taught him how to defend himself. The pavement and the wall will always be more effective than your fists, his father always told him. Then he told me he had to fight many times during his second month there. He told me that his wildest fight was with someone 2 years older who was there because he had repeated the year and that the fight didn't happen. It ended when the bully was left on the ground without getting up after my husband stepped on his face several times. They were both bruised and bloody, and they both ended up with a week suspension from school. They are both currently friends. If you ask, I don't know how men can be friends after fighting to almost death. He told me that after that, they never bothered him again, and people were afraid of him, but that didn't matter to him. According to him, if things could be solved by talking, the better, but some wild people don't understand. Even after being beaten to near death. Now, returning to the subject of the kid, he told me that he did see red at that moment and that he should have controlled himself, but that he only hit his head against the ground once because it was to prevent him from screaming or something. He did not do it out of justice or to teach him a lesson. It just the kid got on his nerves, that he hates physical violence but believes that the only way to respond to it is in the same way. Because if you act with violence it means that you are someone who cannot be reasoned with, so the only answer is violence too. He also told me that, regardless of whether I believe or not, someone over 18 is an adult, and at that age, they are expected to know how to behave with strangers, and at 18, he already knew not to mess with anyone. If he could understand that at that age, it means that the rest can, too. You can't expect much maturity from someone 20 years old, but but he is not going to change his mind on that issue now. I agree that someone over 18 should at least have a certain degree of respect for the rest of the people, and that if something happens to them because they don't know how to behave, it is only their fault and no one else's. Regarding what many asked me about if I called 911 for the kid, no, my priority at that moment was my husband, not the kid, although yesterday we passed by there again, and there was no one, not even stains of dried blood, so I guess the kid just left there hours later that day. And regarding whether I am going to divorce him or not, no, I am not planning to leave my husband. Yes, perhaps the issue of having children will be on hold for a while, but he has never shown behavioral problems or problems of anger towards me, even in moments where I behaved like a child, so I'm not worried about that. What is true is that I told him that he should control himself even more for the legal repercussions than anything else. However, there has been no news about the kid. Whether something happened to him or not is currently not of interest, but I am calm knowing that this did not escalate into major problems and that I was able to understand his point of view by speaking and arguing in a civilized manner. And for those who ask, my husband and I met at a private university where we both studied. In private universities here, the monthly pension is lower for graduates of public schools, almost half, and in some cases, a 70% discount, applicable throughout the entire career, which is why his father transferred him to a public school in his last year of high school. What's a moment in your life that changed you forever? When I was 3, my parents moved from Nigeria to the UK to start a new life there. Things were difficult. We experienced a lot of racism and discrimination from people. Despite that, my parents worked hard to give us the life we have today. When I was 10, my father passed away. Life was hard, and my mother was depressed. Even though it was tough for her to be a single mother, she kept her head high and worked extremely hard to make us comfortable. Some days, she wouldn't eat so we could eat, and everything we asked for would be given to us, even if that meant she didn't have the nicest clothes and valuables. I promised myself I would work hard to pay her back for everything she's done for me and even more. I love my mother so much. My mother works in the hospital as a nurse. She works from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. and is always exhausted. I've heard her sometimes cry in her room about the white people in there, racially abusing her and some even attacking her. They would call her the N-word, tell her to go back to her country, she looks like a monkey, etc. One even went as far as blackface. I experienced racism similar to this as well. In primary school, I would be bullied every day, especially by the same girl. She would say, "Why are you so dark? Were you put in the oven?" Or, "Why is your hair so thick and bushy? You look like a chimpanzee." I remember my father telling me, no matter how bad somebody hurts you, never retaliate because that's worse than what they're doing to you, so I just endured it. Until one day, she crossed the line, and I had enough. She posted a picture of a monkey and me and put "Spot the difference" as the title, then put in the caption, "Hint, there is no difference." I was laughed at and mocked so badly that people started calling me a monkey. I was so upset I told my head teacher. The head teacher was mixed race and felt bad as her father, who was black, went through racism as well. So, she expelled the girl from my primary school, and I never heard of her again. As time passed, things started improving, and my mother seemed happier. The racism also stopped, although I still got a few comments. At 15, I met a guy. We met when I took my little brother to the park. He was there with his little sister. While they went off playing, we spoke for a while, and he asked for my number. I discovered we were attending the same high school, he was even in one of my lessons. We hung out more and more until, one day, he asked me out. I was a bit skeptical because he was white, and even though I had a few white friends, I felt as if I was betraying my parents because of the cruel treatment we received from white people. However, when I told my mother, she was supportive and told me to proceed. So soon, we started dating, and things were wonderful. A few years passed, and we went to the same college. Soon, we were 21 and fiancés. It was one of the best moments in my life. I must mention that I've never met his parents before, but he's met my mother numerous times. I found it a bit weird, and every time I asked, he would say, "My parents are racist and dislike black people, but don't worry, I am nothing like them." One day, though, I had enough and asked him to arrange a dinner with his parents so my mother and I could meet them. He reluctantly agreed and told his parents. They were excited to meet their son's fiancée and soon-to-be-in-law. Soon, the day came, but nothing prepared me for the shock I received. His mum was the woman in the hospital who did blackface to my mum, and his sister was none other than the girl who bullied me in primary school. They apologized for their actions and seemed sincere, so my mum and I forgave them. I thought all was well until one day, while my mum was working, my soon-to-be mother-in-law paid her a visit to the hospital. Me and my fiancé were at work at that time, and so my mother-in-law brutally attacked my mum. His sister was also there and stabbed my mum with a knife, killing her instantly. As soon as I received the news of my mother passing away, my whole world came tumbling down. My mama, my rock, my everything, the reason for my existence was dead. I knew eventually that my mum would die, but I never imagined it to be in this way by my fiancé's family. I was a sobbing mess, and my little brother was equally devastated because he was dating my fiancé's little sister and couldn't believe that her family would do that since they seemed like nice people. My fiancé cut ties with his family for me and pressed charges against his family. Even though I appreciate it, I'm still traumatized by what they did to me. We moved with my brother and his girlfriend as far away as possible. We both went to therapy, and his mum and sister were jailed for 25 years for the murder of my mother. I am now 27 and happily married. I've healed thanks to my loving husband, brother and sister-in-law. This experience changed me for sure, but definitely for the better. Not a day goes past without me remembering that day. When I remember my parents' sacrifices, it gives me another reason to keep going. I'm happier than ever and will never let anything put me down. I've been through so many things in my life. So, for everyone who feels like giving up, remember that every hardship makes you stronger, and don't forget that people love you. There is always a happily ever after, you must be patient. I love you, Mummy and Daddy. R.I.P., my angels, I can't wait to be with you in heaven.